So I tell Therese, my wife, that I have to keep flying a lot because I have to keep learning. Because if I'm not learning as a pilot, I'm getting stupider, and that's not safe. So it's in everybody's best interest, if they're going to be flying with me, myself included, that I fly a lot. And it's all for safety's sake, right? It's no other reason. It's not for my own entertainment or any other reason. And I started out 6 years ago. I put off flying until I was in my mid 40s because I really wasn't mature enough to be a pilot in my 20s and 30s. I was kind of a loose operation, mostly spending my time on the water. But then I learned how to fly Cessnas, and then I learned how to fly gliders 5-6 years ago. And I like to think I'm a little more mature now and making better decisions. But the glider flying, really, like, why learn to fly gliders if you've already got a private pilot's license and powered flight? And Mark kind of touched on it, that there's ways to get energy from lift, from ridge and thermal and wave, but there's also just a big safety aspect, because as soon as your engine is like, if you have engine problems in a powered plane, then you are a glider, and you better figure out how to get yourself down safely and your equipment down safely. So that's what this presentation's about. It's the second time I've given it. It's about 20 minutes. I was in Yuma, Arizona on a work assignment for 6 weeks this summer. August and September is not maybe the most ideal time to be in Yuma, Arizona, because the average high temp was around 110. We had plenty of days in the 115s. But the project was very successful, so it was gratifying. And now it's like, okay, I got to come home. But of course, during those 6 weeks, my big concern was watching the weather and the smoke. The wildfires definitely got my attention, because I'm not an instrument pilot. Wasn't ready to, wasn't trained or ready to fly instruments on the way home. And it had rained the week before, just enough to make the smoke maybe manageable, safe for VFR flight home from Yuma, with one fuel stop just in the Reno area, northern Nevada. So basically, the summary is, I did my refuel stop. I got into Southern Oregon, got into some area at around 12,000 foot altitude where there was some moisture, some visible moisture. I was still VFR, but it was enough moisture and the right temperature that the carb iced up, and I was unable to get the engine cleared, get the carb cleared, and keep the engine running, and it quit completely. So I ended up on this gravel road, and we're going to kind of go through the step-by-step on how that sequence went, what we can learn from it, and then how we can all become kind of safer, better pilots as a result of this experience. Important to note, I am not an instructor. I'm not pretending to teach anyone anything. I'm just sharing an experience. If other instructors are on this call or want to use this presentation as an example for learning, go for it. I'm not pretending to be an instructor, just a guy with a little bit of flying experience that wants to share it. So recent flying experience, like I said, I got my pilot's license in 2015. I've got 500 hours total time. The 500-hour mark was on the way down to Yuma in that same Cessna. This year, went in with 3 other guys on this mall that's shown in this slide. That's my wife standing behind it. And we did some backcountry flying, which was super fun. Got some tailwheel experience. I've got about 300 glider flights under my belt. Maybe 200 of those might be commercial flights. I don't know. I've been doing a bunch of scenic rides for the club. And the most recent new passion is the backcountry stuff in the mall. It's been a lot of fun this summer. Ratings and endorsements, just kind of overview. I'm a private pilot. I got single engine land and single engine sea. I did a year ago. Commercial glider, tailwheel, and high performance. High performance is relevant to the Cessna 182 because it's more than 200 horse. So here's the morning brief. This is actually a sunset, but I pretend that's a sunrise in Yuma. The sunrises are beautiful there, and 6 weeks, I'm reading about the smoke up in California and Oregon, just as a nasty external factor. But the irony is that Yuma was clear. Like the whole August and September, it was totally clear. There was no smoke until the morning I leave. They're calling the conditions at Yuma Airport IMC, but only for about 20 minutes. And then it cleared enough. There was a local little fire, and then, okay, good to go. So I'm on a VFR plan home from Yuma, happy to be heading home. There's my flight plan there, the magenta line going through Western Nevada. And you can see as you get into Southern Oregon, there's that orange circle, that TFR that was one of many along the route. That's just the one that caught my attention because it's between some military operating areas that were also relevant, because I can't really go to the east and it was smoky to the west. So I was kind of, once I went on that flight plan, I could have gone way east through Eastern Oregon, but it would have been a major divert. And by the time I ran into trouble, I was already at the white dot there. I don't know if can you see my cursor there? There's my cursor. So I refueled here near Reno, and then I'm up here when trouble started. And then this picture on the left, you can see fires and the smoke that I was happy to have gone through when trouble started. So back to the morning briefing, I'm looking at where are the clouds and where the low clouds. So on the left screen, you've got as much as 90% cloud cover in southeastern Oregon, which was definitely a concern. And then, but none of them are low clouds, right? So the right-hand side of the screen, you got the low clouds. It's all showing green, so we should be able to stay under that stuff. Another factor, the morning of the flight, got to deal with a flat tire. Hope that it stays inflated for the refueling in Nevada and the trip home. Turned out to not be an issue, but it's, you know, pilots got to sort through these issues, these questions, like what's gonna be a challenge today. Nav light lens had fallen out, and I just decided, you know, I'm not flying at night, so going with it. Northern Nevada haze. So that was a couple of hours in central Nevada. Wasn't the greatest experience, but I could definitely see 5 miles visibility through that Nevada haze. So I was maintaining VFR. Replaced by, as I got into Oregon, this is what I saw. And it looked pretty good, actually. There was, you know, a couple mile gaps between the clouds, and I was able to sort of not cloud slalom, but maintain separation from the clouds. I didn't really want to descend under these clouds because the bases were at about 10,000 feet. It'd be a bumpier ride, and I'd have that TFR to contend with. And the TFR that I showed in that slide, that orange circle, went to 12,000 feet. So staying at 12,500 was kind of my target. And that, in this view right here, you guys can see the broken clouds, right? I'm cruising at 12,500 in the Cessna. And I'm seeing about +5C, not really appreciating the moisture content as much as I probably should have. And here I underline, should have preemptively applied carb heat. Right? There was no symptoms at this point. I'm cruising along just fine. But of course, the initial signs of carb ice are running engine. So for those of you who powered pilots, running engine, automatic carb heat, apply carb heat, and that redirects the inlet air next by the tailpipe. So now the engine that's going to go into the engine combustion chamber is getting preheated by the tailpipe, and it goes in the carburetor. If there's any ice forming in the carburetor, which is really kind of a vacuum suck of cold ice forming air, or potentially ice forming air, what you want to do to melt that ice as it sucks into the carburetor is you apply carb heat, and that redirects that incoming air by the tailpipe, assuming the tailpipe is nice and hot. In this engine, the exhaust gas temperatures run about 1300 to 1400 degrees Fahrenheit, the way I tend to run it. And, so that's plenty of heat to warm the inlet air, and then you can eliminate, if you're on top of it, if you stay in front of it, you can eliminate that ice before it becomes a problem. So the initial response, I did apply carb heat, seemed like 5 to 10 minutes, might have been only 1 to 2 minutes, but it just kept running rough. And then it went from bad to worse, because as I monitored the EGT, the exhaust gas temperatures, they fell from about 1300s down to 1200s, and even cooler. They went into triple digit instead of quadruple digit there. And max CHT also was going down in a hurry. So I could tell my combustion was, I'm losing power. So I'm monitoring RPM, which was actually pretty negligible change in RPM, because the prop is a constant speed prop. So what I should have been monitoring was the inlet, the manifold pressure, right? Because manifold pressure is basically monitoring the vacuum of your carburetor relative to the outside air. And at 12,000 feet, you're at, I don't know, 20 inches absolute. And then as your carburetor is closed, due to, like if you close your carburetor due to pulling out the power, or if you ice up, you're going to see that manifold pressure drop well below 20 inches of mercury. And that's probably what was happening. I should have been monitoring that. I was scanning for traffic below. I was over the TFR and I was not seeing any traffic below, but I was worried that if I couldn't maintain altitude over a TFR, a temporary flight restriction, I'm going to violate somebody's airspace. So I should have applied the carb heat sooner. I should have monitored manifold pressure, and I should have leaned the mixture. And that number 3 is a key one, because I did not lean the mixture early and often. I was watching the temperatures go down, but I didn't really do anything about it. Had I studied this issue in more detail, like I have since this experience, I would have gone ahead and leaned the fuel mixture, try to get the tailpipe nice and glowing red hot, so that it would melt the ice. And so by failing to do that, my tailpipe went cold, and then my ability to melt the ice went cold. I lost that ability. I did have an ongoing conversation. I was on flight following while I'm descending from 12,500 to 10,000. I was descending for 2 reasons. One is I was trying to get into some cooler air, some warmer air, melt the ice, and I was losing power, so I just couldn't maintain altitude. So I said, Center, this is November 2357 X-ray with suspected carb ice. And can you tell me if there's any traffic below me in that TFR? I may need to descend. So short pause, and they said, no, you should be good to go. There's nobody fighting that fire. So I continued to descend, and as soon as you tell them, they're there to help, basically. And this is especially important for our youth members who are listening. They're not the police. They're not going to get you in trouble. This guy really wanted to be helpful. So a few minutes later, he came back on and asked me about the carb ice. How you doing? And for a moment, I don't know if it was just optimistic or what, but I said, it seems to be getting better, but I'm going to circle over this road, because there was a little town, a lake bed and a town where there was some land out options. And then if I had continued north, it was not good. It was hilly and rugged terrain. And so I just said, I'm going to circle over this road until I'm sure it's clear. And he offered to help, anything I can do. And I said, well, if you know any 182 pilots or special tricks on melting carb ice, I'm all ears. Suddenly I'm the most eager to learn student. And so silence for a while, and then he comes back and says, have you tried applying carb heat? It's like the most obvious thing. Yeah, I tried that, not working. And my engine continues to run rougher. So closing, now close up of what I'm seeing from now I'm at 10,000 feet, looking at my land out options, hoping the engine clears, but I'm just kind of assessing the situation. This is what I'm seeing. I just got north of that TFR. The dry lake bed is south of me. I could have landed there, but you could land in mud there and get stuck and really have a problem. And then in the black oval, I'm seeing this nice east-west county road. It looks paved. Looks like there's nothing around, and there's maybe a store or something within a mile or two. So I just circle over that road until I hope my engine will clear. And I say, yeah, that's my land out option. But it didn't get better. It got worse. So now the engine dies completely at about 8,000 feet and becomes a windmill. Now it's a liability, right? I'd be much better off with no propeller, no engine. Forget it. That's not an option. I'm not going to make it there. I'm going to land on this road. That's what I told him. And here, it didn't even occur to me to declare an emergency, but in hindsight, it might have had some benefits. I still don't know what, but I did remember to aviate, navigate, and communicate. So basically trim for 80 knots, feather the prop for less drag, and circled over that road. Don't try to go, find a better option when my options were pretty much below me. And I knew I only had a few minutes of flight time before I'd have to touch down somewhere. So there's my landing site, and I didn't know which way the wind was blowing, but I saw this road, and then at the last minute, I saw that power line. So there's my east-west road. That was my intended landing site, and it turned out not to be viable because of power lines. So instead, at the last minute, I redirected to that yellow streak, which is a gravel road. And what that looked like in the last minute of flight was that kind of a bendy road with a dip in it, and I just didn't know how well that was going to go. So this is a Google Earth view. Can you see the power lines running east-west or left-right across that screen? What shocked me is how close you have to get to the road before you can see the power lines. They're there on that east-west road. But yeah, so at the last minute, I redirected. So that this is kind of my flight path. My approach was this helix, circling over, and then I was going to do the red planned approach, and at the last minute, maybe I was 800 feet up. I said, well, that's not going to work. I'm not going to do the red planned approach. Instead, I'm going to do the blue landing base turn final. And I landed to the north on that gravel. I don't know if it's a road or a driveway, but that's where I ended up. Then I got on the ground, exhaled, and said, holy shit, pardon my French, I'm not dead. And the engine, or the airplane seems to be unbent. So I made 2 calls. I made one to 121.5, which is kind of a guard frequency I keep on a radio when I can. I could not communicate with ATC, but there was a Horizon jet overhead that was serving as a relay. And he was very interested to hear that I was on the ground and safe. And he was happy to relay that information to ATC. So they're not just sending out the 911 call. And then text number 2 was kind of a 2-part. Texted my wife that I just dead stick landed on a dirt road in case she hears from someone else, I'm okay. And to TAC Arrow, who owns that plane, that I'm okay, and I'm suspecting carb ice. The TAC Arrow thing turned out to be pretty important because those guys are really good at backcountry flying and short field takeoff scenarios. And so Jeremy and Brian got on the phone. I called them and said, here's the situation. What do you guys think? And Brian or Jeremy was really helpful, offload any extra fuel, empty your cargo if you don't need your cooler full. I gave away some water bottles and Gatorades, and lightened up the plane as much as I could. And I was kind of underestimating the length of road that I had to work with. I told him about 1,000 feet, but it was really maybe more like 2,000. So there's my gravel road looking back nose to nose with the airplane. This is looking to the south. And Jeremy said, well, pace it off and set yourself a go, no go line at about 900 feet, because that's the takeoff distance of a Cessna 182 when it's light, and respect it. If you're not ready to rotate and fly at that line, hit the brakes. And if that happens, that's what I'm seeing. I've got that much road left to work with. So that's basically the length of road that I landed on and then pushed back. And the other key bit of information was don't try to do a run up there. Do a nice healthy run up, but not on the gravel, because that's going to damage the prop potentially. So I had some help push me all the way back to this asphalt run, the east-west road, and you can see the power lines overhead. Well, the power lines make it useless as a runway, but the asphalt, it's not a busy road. I used it for my run-up area and kept the prop protected. So all that was kind of helpful to consult with, phone a friend basically, and do it with some expert advice. So that's what I did. The run-up was successful. Engine was running strong because, it took me 20, 30 minutes to push the thing back into this run-up area. And by then, of course, the ice had melted. And later, Brian had remarked that, carb ice is a perfect killer. It's undetectable, because, it could kill someone, and then, it melts away and dries up, and you never know it was there. It leaves without a trace. And that's exactly what happened here. But it didn't kill me. It just sort of made an adventure out of an otherwise kind of routine flight. So run up was successful. Thing was running strong. There was a couple people watching. And the last thing I did before I took off is I texted this picture to the state troopers who were looking for me. They wanted to help. They couldn't find me, and they were ringing my phone. I said, well, I'm north of Summer Lake somewhere. I don't even know the name of the road. So I wasn't a jerk, but I also wasn't really wanting state patrol help at that point. I was just trying to, or state trooper help. I was just trying to be responsible. I texted them my location, and then I hit the gas and took off. Got back on flight following to resume radar service back to Hood River, and the ATC guy was so happy to hear from me. You can just tell that these guys feel like they're sharing their responsibility for a safe flight, and it was nice to feel like he was part of the team and got back in the air. He ended up handing me off to another air traffic controller as I proceeded north, and I overheard another conversation with another pilot asking if icing was a big risk where he was flying, and that ATC guy says, no pyreps of icing. And I couldn't bite my tongue hard enough. I said, yeah, well, I just had a bad case of icing, and I had to land on a gravel road. But, these guys cover a big area. And the other pilot was well north up in the Puget Sound area. So I was just so full of new information about icing that I had to share it, and probably wasn't all that helpful to the other folks on the radio. Coming home, these are the Lennies that some of you might recognize over Mount Hood. I know Kelly's seen these, and Mark's been sharing pictures of some Lennies over Mount Hood lately. And you couldn't see Mount Hood, but you could see sort of the byproduct of Mount Hood and the westerly winds blowing past them. So this was my welcome home that day from 6 weeks on the road. Lessons learned: apply carb heat early and often. I've even been advised, if there's any visible moisture in the area, if there's any question, go ahead and run half carb heat. There's no shame in that, no problem with that. it's going to protect you more often than it's going to, if you're just cruising, you're not looking to climb, you're not looking for extra performance out of your engine, just run a little bit of carb heat. And if you don't run it at partial carb heat always, it's a good practice to, apply carb heat for a minute or two every 5 or 10 or 20 minutes when there's any visible moisture around. Lean the mixture. When the engine started running rough, I should have leaned it to make that exhaust gas nice and hot, and maintain landing options and backup options. The gravel road was really not on my radar until the last minute. I should have been looking at my primary and my backup way earlier. I just got lucky with a gravel road that it was there and there were no power lines. And then trust your training. Guys like Mark and now Steve Frisbee, these CFIs, they know their stuff. Pay attention to, and I fly with as many different CFIs and CFIGs as I can, because you learn from all these guys. It really will save your life. That's my presentation. Any questions?
Hey, thanks, Cory, for sharing that. Having grown up and learned to fly in Alaska, and most of my experiences there, one thing I would make sure everyone is aware of is that the temperature can be as high as 70 degrees ambient, and you still can experience carburetor ice, because the way a carburetor works is that pressure drop across the venturi, and that's where it will drops, and the temperature drops as well. So high moisture content, and you can have 70-degree external temperatures and still encounter carburetor ice. So something very important. A lot of people think it's going to occur closer to freezing, but that's not necessarily true.
Very good point. Yeah, thanks. Couldn't have said it better.
One thing I might add there, Cory, is I've never really heard of carb ice being in PIREPs. I think, when it comes to carb ice, that's kind of between you and your airplane and your maintenance, because icing in PIREPs usually refers to airframe ice and the possibility of that type of icing.
Yeah, another good point. And another thing I've read is that you can have the same engine, a Lycoming i540 in a Cessna, and it's more susceptible to icing than if that same engine is in a different airframe. It has to do with how the inlet, the cowling and the baffling and how it's installed.
Yep, no, that's true.
Now, you weren't IMC at the time, were you? You were just kind of out probably between clouds, or on top of a layer, or what?
I was navigating at cloud level, but between, there are 2 to 3 mile gaps in the clouds, right?
Okay,
so
kind of lenticulars around. So you were definitely in an area where it was moist, near saturation.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Kelly, you want to weigh in?
Oh, I was just thinking how this might relate to flying our gliders, and how, if we're flying, it seems like there's more and more people now flying in wave conditions where you're getting up there, it's quite cold, and you're getting above the overcast, and then you have to come home sometime, and you're going to be probably collecting some ice if you're flying through the cloud layer on the way back to the airport, and probably something that we never talk about, never really don't think about, because glider pilots generally don't fly through some clouds where there's enough moisture for airframe ice. But I can totally see that happening in our neck of the woods.
Well, Kelly, let's expand on that. I mean, you don't have a carburetor to worry about in a glider, but what other problems would you expect in a glider if you do encounter ice?
Yeah, well, I suppose your instruments, you could have airspeed problems, and your variometer and things could freeze up as well. I just wonder how much moisture you'd pretty much have to be flying, to pick up some kind of rime ice or something on the airframe, or it would seem like to me you'd have to be flying through some kind of cloud layer almost, wouldn't you?
Well, I think one thing, there's a the Soaring magazine it was either December or January, I believe, of last year, did a great big article on wave flying. I don't know if they put this in there, but I was talking to somebody the other day or reading something, and especially as we're considering, or as we are going to operate through the winter, making sure that your spoilers and things like that are free of water on the ground and things, because then as you go up, you can definitely ice those out, and then when you come back down, there's a possibility of those being kind of locked shut.
Yeah,
You know,
ice is a
another-
pretty good adhesive. In my case, it was carb ice is an obstruction to airflow into the carburetor, and then you lose power in the engine. But ice can definitely be an adhesive that'll freeze your car doors shut, or if it freezes your elevator, your ailerons, or your spoilers, then you're gonna have a very different experience, right? Different kinds of problems.
I think Mark is right there. That's what comes to mind for me is if, especially operating in the winter, if you don't make sure that the glider is dry, and if there might be some moisture trapped inside the control surfaces or around the hinge points, and you get up to altitude where you are at a freezing temperature, could jam a control surface or the spoilers.
Yeah.
Hey, Jeff, I have a question. If Cory would have called an emergency to ATC, would he have had like I don't know, fire trucks trying to meet him somewhere? Or
Yeah, what can we expect? Like,
You're on
I
mute.
didn't call an emergency.
You're on mute there, Jeff.
Yeah, the main benefit he'd have gotten there is it would have made the TFR accessible to him, if there was anything in that
Oh.
TFR. No, they're not they don't care. I mean, there's no harm in declaring an emergency. It just sort of puts ATC on a little higher alert.
Okay, so it's not like he would have had an automatic call from the FAA or something like that.
No, probably not. Well, there might be a little paperwork, but like I say, if there was something he would have liked better than that gravel road inside the TFR, he could have declared an emergency and had that accessible to him.
Hey,
Yeah.
Cory, I have a question. What did you just suspect it was carb ice? I mean, every time I've ever rented an airplane and gone, flying, I'm always like super sensitive to, any kind of strange, going ons, because you're just not familiar with that aircraft. So were you like, you're up someplace, you're not flying through any visible moisture. What made you suspect that it was carb ice? Was that your first suspicion?
Well, two things actually. It's funny you ask, because the first time I flew in this airplane, it was from North Las Vegas up to Hood River with Brian Prang. He and I were delivering it. I think Hood Tech had just purchased it, and we had similar symptoms, a rough running engine in about the same part of Oregon, but the carb heat cleared it in about 2 or 3 minutes. We just applied carb heat and we cleared it and carried on. So the rough running engine, maybe it was familiar. It was a familiar symptom. In this case, there was a funny, like when I was applying carb heat, it definitely, how you get less power when you apply carb heat. You pull the carb heat out and the RPMs go down a little bit. There was a middle position that was really bad and really bad. Like it would go from, I don't know, 2,300 RPM to 1,300 RPM in that middle position. So I knew the carb heat control knob was doing something. I didn't fully understand why that middle position would cause it to really lose power, but that kind of confirmed my suspicion that it was carb ice. And I didn't know for sure that it was carb ice until I had landed, pushed back on the gravel road, started up again, and it ran great a half an hour later. Right, that was my confirmation that it was carb ice. But that middle position where it ran really, really low power, man, anybody want to offer a hypothesis? I still can't explain it.
I have heard that at some point, you're melting that ice that's built up in the Venturi and in the carburetor, and it's breaking up, and it's that could potentially clog the Venturi, more as it's breaking up and going through. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what I've heard about. I've experienced carburetor icing in cars, and but
maybe I should have left it in that position. If it was dripping water into the engine and making it run poorly,
right.
That's actually a good thing. It's
Yeah.
getting the ice out of the carb.
Right. I think that's probably true. You know, as soon as the engine quits running, and if you don't have that air rushing through the carburetor and that cooling action of the Venturi, that ice melts out pretty quickly. So it would have been interesting. Of course, you know, I'm not advising anyone to. If you got some power, sometimes it leads you down a pathway that you could accept some additional risk that you might not want to, but it might have cleared. And I don't know, when did the engine quit? What altitude above the ground were you?
I'd say it quit for sure at 8,000 and
8,000. And then what was that AGL? I mean, what was the elevation there where you landed?
about 4,000. So I only had about 4,000 AGL to work with
Right.
as a
Right.
glider.
What was the outside air temperature at that altitude? Say 4,000 AGL, 8,000. Did you know it?
I think I wrote plus 5C. It was the last temp I remember seeing.
Yeah.
At
Yeah, you can
cruise.
imagine, you know, you've got that engine still has a lot of heat in it. And then once it's not running anymore and you don't have the air coming through the carburetor, then it could just, and you might have been able to restart it a lot sooner than what you think. But, you know, of course, the proper thing to do is get yourself situated in the landing area. And when you've got something made, go ahead and do that.
Yeah, well, in hindsight, I'm almost grateful that it did quit, because if it had kept running rough, I might have made some stupider decisions.
Right. Yeah,
Once
a lot
it
of times
quit,
that gets you.
Yeah.
A lot of times that gets you in
uncertainty
bigger
is
trouble with a
worse.
partial engine, partial power failure than a complete.
Exactly. Yeah.
Another consideration I think I've heard of on engine failures is you pull it right back to minimum sink speed, I guess, and try to get your prop to stop, and then keep it at a slow speed like that, and you're not going to have a windmilling prop, you know, increase your glide distance significantly.
Yeah. Yeah. In this case, I didn't think I needed glide distance. I just trimmed for 80 because that's what the book says, right?
Was your prop windmilling the whole time?
Oh yeah.
After it quit?
Yeah, but like I said, I wasn't looking to maximize L over D. I'm right over what I thought was a good landing area. I just wanted maximum controllability as a glider, and I've never landed at 182 dead stick. I always land with a little bit of power.
Right. Well, you handled it very well.
Yeah, you made great decisions. And even at the end, you noticed the poles, and you fortunately had another airstrip, essentially that road to land on. I think everything worked out, you know. Well, obviously it worked out great. One, you're safe, and then two, the airplane was safe. I have 4 different airplanes, or 4 different 182s in my logbook that I've flew regularly. They all iced, you know, and one of them, or well, 3 of them were from, well, 2 of them were, I guess, TAC Arrows, which were formerly classic wings. But I learned that very early with that airframe and that engine combination, and they would ice. And on my very first solo, I was flying a 150 Scott's 152 down to Bend, and it started icing, and it was kind of a gorgeous day. It was a 70 day. There was a little bit some just cloud streets, and it was the classic. The RPM is starting to go down, and I was like, "Hey, quit that," you know. And it's like, and so I pulled out the carb heat, and it came back up, and I put it away, and it did it again, and then I and finally I just left it out for a while, and then put it away, and you know. What I forgot there in that solo time and your training, you're supposed to leave it out at least 30 seconds, you know, but to me, it's like the RPMs came back and I put it away, and, you know, you're not very experienced aviator at that point anyway. So, but just having that happen on my first solo made me very aware of watching an engine flow and trying to pay attention outside. You know, we all know Al Cray, and I think on his first solo, his engine died. So he probably has a whole different way of looking at all his takeoffs.
Yeah, yeah. I think that was he wasn't even a rated pilot yet. He was a student pilot leaving Grandpa's farm and had an engine out. Yeah, and he made it back there with zero additional damage. I applaud Al. Al's got a great story about that one. So who here preemptively applies carb heat just periodically in crews? I mean, that's become a new practice of mine since I had this experience. Um, you know, especially if there's clouds around, now it's carb heat comes on every 10, 20 minutes at least.
I don't say that, just to answer, I mean, I don't say that I preemptively do it, but I'm very aware of it.
Yeah.
I don't know about the other tow pilots, but I think I pull the carb heat on as soon as the glider's released too, and I'm pulling the power back.
Yeah, I do the same.
Yeah, all the way down in tow 7, the whole descent, because you don't need power. You need
Right, and there's no
safety.
reason not to. I mean, it's not filtered air, but at that altitude, it's okay.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense.
Does any of our youth members have questions about any part of that trip, or something in there that's not very clear technically?
You know, Cory, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So this is Kelly. So, you know, when I learned to fly in the desert, you know, in Salt Lake and Las Vegas, and you know, there's just not much humidity there, you know. So, but I can see that, you know, when you look at the humidity around here, especially in the winter months or the fall months, it's cool. A lot of moisture in the air. So definitely something you need to pay attention to for sure.
I just had a question. How long does it usually, like, how long does it take you guys to feel comfortable talking to the ATC? Because I know that that's like one of my fears when I go up there, just accidentally saying something wrong or being somewhere I shouldn't.
That's a great question. Who's that? Ethan or Ian?
Ian. Yep.
Ian. No, that's a terrific question. And the dumbest question is the one that you're too shy to ask. So if you're asking it, it's worth asking. And you're not going to get in trouble for asking a dumb question. They're there to help you. The CFIs can probably answer this a lot better than I can, but I've made plenty of mistakes, both requesting help with ATC and getting into airspace that I wasn't supposed to be in. They are there to help, and they'll bend over backwards and sideways to keep you safe, both in answering your questions and yeah, I mean, a week before this flight, I was in San Diego picking up a friend and got not even a quarter mile into this Class Bravo airspace in San Diego, and the ATC was right there. You know, if you're still on this frequency, 57 X-ray, turn right, stay out of Bravo. Okay, thank you. And you're not in trouble. They're there to help.
Does anybody know if ATC still allows any kind of visitation? Because one of the things when I was younger, what really got me over that was visiting a control tower, and then later on going and visiting at Seattle Center. There at their Auburn, they had an organized sessions where you could go in with groups of 20 people or so, and then they, you know, I suppose they let all their top secret stuff not happen then stuff, but it was really informative to go see how those guys actually do their job and everything. You know, you really get the feel of this. Yeah, it's a pretty informal environment they're in.
They do. Well, I don't know right now during COVID, but they do that. I remember after going through,
Especially for the youth members, it's really worthwhile to try to get in on something like that.
yeah.
Yeah, the other thing I've learned is that there's different levels of intensity. If you're in a rural part of Oregon on a cross country, they're really just there to help, and it's a pretty relaxed conversation. If you're
they'll have a conversation with you.
Yeah, exactly.
I was bringing a 140 back one time, and you know, the Cessna 140 had also advertised itself as a business liner, and I was on flight following with Seattle Center, or no, somebody in Nevada wasn't Seattle Center, and he asked me a question about the airplane. Like that's how dead silent he was bored covering whatever he was covering or not covering. And so we had a conversation about that whole thing.
Ian, if you're interested in improving your communication and understanding that there's some, and I don't know if you do flight simming at all, but Pilot Edge, they've got videos for training videos, and then I think you get a month of free service if you're using any flight simulator, and you can interact with people who are training as controllers that do air traffic control. It's extremely valuable. It helps you build your wording and your interaction with them, and you'll understand it. And they really do train you, and they've got training scenarios that take you through a bunch of VFR, and if you want IFR procedures. It's really good. I would definitely suggest you pursue that if you do any flight simming, which I suspect you probably do. Pilot Edge, it's a great program.
Thank you.
And do you have any specific?
I actually don't do any flight sims though, but oh, go ahead, Cory.
Yeah, Ian, do you have any specific examples, like you were flying along or thinking about calling ATC and just didn't had a question that you didn't know if it was appropriate?
No. I mean, I write what I have to say usually on my hand, like up until we started flying out of North Plains. I did that for every flight. Like when I went to a Civil Air Patrol encampment and it was just the Civil Air Patrol guys flying, I still got real nervous talking on the radio because I was afraid I'd mess up.
Ian, when I was a student, I remember having the same kind of anxiety. I had a lot of anxiety about talking to ATC. So what I did with my instructor is any call I was about to make to ATC, I just rehearse it with my instructor. And you could rehearse it to yourself in the cockpit, or your dog in the airplane, whoever. It doesn't matter. Just before you say it to ATC, before you hit the push to talk button, you can just say it into your own microphone and see if it sounds right, and then adjust it, and then hit the push to talk and say what you're going to say to ATC. That helped me a lot to preempt the discussion with my instructor.
Yeah, that's what I found myself doing sometimes, and then again just writing it on my hand.
Yeah.
What I would say is that it's completely normal, and the more you do it, the more at home you'll feel, and the better you'll be with it. So it gets to be like it's not a big deal after a while, but yeah, it's completely normal to feel that anxiety. You key the mic and everything in your brain just goes out the window.
Well, also, since you've got your handheld two-way radio, just tune that to air traffic control frequencies and listen, and you'll learn the standard phraseology. I mean, there is a real standard phraseology that's almost like their own language. And once you learn that, then it just kind of comes out of your mouth naturally.
Yeah.
I remember Ian, the first time I flew with my 17-year-old son over Portland International, we're coming back from the coast, and I was being vectored straight over the top of the airport, and my son said, "Dad, can you ask for clearance to do a barrel roll straight over the airport?" That would not have been appropriate, but it was my son having fun with us. Request permission for the barrel
would have been denied. Yeah.
Hey, Mark, this question is for you. I was wondering, this last couple of flights you guys had in the wave, those couple of days? Maybe Mark's not listening.
No, I'm listening. Sorry that your audio cut out there. What?
I was wondering if anybody had a transponder the last couple of days when you guys were flying in the wave.
Yeah. Mike's got ADSB in and out on his plane.
Well, of course he does.
And
he likes his electronics, I know.
Yeah, his cockpit, as he'll tell you, it's nicer than most 747s. But yeah, he's got that. Alex may have a transponder. I'm gonna do the whole ADSB in and out. I'm not sure if I'm gonna do it this winter or not.
So what do they require if you get up above 18?
Well, I mean, so there's a couple things here, right? Like we have a wave window, although the FAA is kind of changing that. There's a big wave window to the south of Mount Hood, and used to be able to just kind of, well, Tim or Kelly, did you guys ever open up that wave window?
You know, I never opened it up, but the procedure was that you're supposed to call them the morning, at least the morning before you wanted to access it.
Okay.
Preferably the evening before or the night before, which is totally crazy because you wouldn't know if you needed it or not. But anyway, you could open it. So you call them in the morning and say you planned on accessing the window, and they would tell you to call. So they would talk it over apparently and be expecting maybe somebody wanting to open the wave window. So you could open it from the air. And you could call them and tell them what your intentions were, and then they would open it. Now, I've been in the air before when Rolf has just tried opening it from the air, and they weren't all too happy about that whole situation. You know, it just kind of caught them off guard.
Well, can you describe the wave window? Like if I'm climbing through 9,000 feet in Parkdale, I'm on the Hood approach. Am I in the wave window?
No, the wave window starts at 18 to the south of Mount Hood. There's some coordinates. I don't know if that's on our website.
So the other thing is the agreement. The agreement is between
Ian. Let's say I'm Ian and I'm climbing through 9,000. I'm pretty excited because the wave is good and I'm hooking into it. I'm over Parkdale, and I'm a little bit shy about talking to ATC, but I also don't want to have a 737 blast through my cockpit. What should I do as I'm climbing through 9,000 over Parkdale?
Well, the problem is when you're climbing at 9,000 over Parkdale, you're going to be doing it in probably some kind of a wave. So you're going to be facing into the wind. The aircraft that you're worried about are on approach. They're going to be coming from the east. So you're not going to see it. You're not going to be able to see any approaching aircraft. And you're going to be right in the middle of their approach. The main approach is right just to the north or south of Middle Mountain where the power lines are. Right there is the main approach, and I believe that they come in anywhere between 9,000 and 12,000 feet right there. Every once in a while, they'll give somebody the mountain view, and they'll see them. They'll be flying over towards Mount Hood a little bit further to get a view of the mountain. But I've often, had them fly right over me, and a couple of times right underneath me without any kind of transponder. So I don't know if I was on radar and they were, even paying attention or not. So it's a real issue. If you're loitering in that area, which happens to be a great wave spot, you're going to be vulnerable. And I think Mark can tell you, he's called them a couple of times and they appreciated the fact that you've contacted them. However, if you don't have a transponder, you're a hard target for them to follow, especially if you're not moving. You're in the way.
Well, let's hear from some of the CFIs. Is it a good idea? Should you call them and tell them where you are and where you're going?
I mean, so what I've done is I call at that section is 119.65. That's Seattle Center, right? And so if you're a power guy and you're heading into Portland, then they're going to hand you off to approach after that, right? But what Kelly is no Tim, you got a transponder. Kelly, do you got a transponder?
I have a transponder. Kelly does,
yeah. Okay. So that one of those times that we were up there and I called him on our way over, he was like, oh yeah, I got all three of you. He's like, you must be he asked me which ship I was, and he said, oh, you must be the one that's just my primary target because I don't have a transponder. And I was like, yeah. So he can see us all, and they start to pick us up on primary target around 5,500 over Hood River Airport. If you try to talk to them, they well, you may be able to talk to them, but they can't see you till that. They'll tell you they're going to lose you around 7,000, but I know they can see you down to 5.5 because I've talked to them at 5.5 for years coming up out of there. And so I just call them and just say, hey, Seattle Center, this is the glider, always say glider first. And because then at that point, you have right away. And also it's not like you can just follow their directions. And so I just call them and just say, hey, well, I try to leave out all that extra stuff. And that's probably the stuff, Ian, that gets you nervous, but just call Seattle Center glider 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And then just wait for them to call you back, and they'll come back on and they'll say, oh yeah, glider 1, 2, 3, 4, Seattle Center, go ahead. And you'll be like, hey, me and my buddies, there's 2 of us, there's 3 gliders over here. We're flying the wave. We're, approximately tell them where you're at and where you're trying to go to. And they'll, and they may say, I don't have anything coming in on the hood for arrival right now. Or, yeah, we got somebody coming in. We see you. They're above you right now. Or they may say, if you get to this point, let us know if you're at this altitude and at this point, or let me know when you guys are going to come back up to the Hood River Airport. And they just kind of just talk to you. And I like to talk to them more when I get around the mountain. I'm not worried about them because they're not sending 737s close to that mountain, not too close to it. But I don't get too worried about them because if they're on an IFR flight path, they're directing them away from objects that they could run into, right? And but when you start crossing back through the Parkdale Valley, like on that day when we were going back, I called them and said, hey, this is glider 304 Papa Kilo, and we're heading back through the north. And then they may say, okay, let me know when you're about this altitude, especially me, because he's or she was just going off of the primary target, which is not it. They have to consider a primary target on their radar as a not confirmed altitude, right? Because like Kelly and Tim have transponders that are, I'm guessing mode C, that can report an altitude. But with me, I had to tell them, or once in a while they'll call and they'll request my altitude just because I don't have anything reporting to them. Jeff, do you know on the radar with a primary target, does it give them an indication of altitude?
No indication. I was going to say my experience with that is I've been in a 250 knot airliner going into Reno all the time. They say possible glider traffic at, your 10 o'clock.
So I talked to a air traffic controller once, and they said that there's all kinds of filters. So if you're not moving, if you're stationary, then somehow it could, it'll filter you right out of the scenario. Which, if you're a lot of times, if you're in the wave, you're not really don't have any kind of ground speed at all. So I just wonder, I mean, I'm not paranoid about, flying there, but definitely it's something to be aware of. If you're in the Parkdale Valley and you're in between, say 9,000 and 12,000 feet, it's probably not a good idea to linger right there in that particular spot. Which,
yeah, it's probably a pretty narrow spot because now with GPS, pretty much all the airliners are on the same arrival path unless they've been vectored out for traffic or something. And
yeah, it's true. They're always in the same
where
spot.
That is, you can kind of have your heads up. You might see them; they're not going to see you, probably.
I mean, the only time I had a close call, I think that it was the Air National Guard was messing with me. Like it was a C-130, and I could feel the vibration in the stick before I heard or saw the plane. And it was like the vibration, the stick was getting stronger and stronger, and all of a sudden, right over the top of me, this C-130 comes. I think he buzzed me because as soon as he passed me, he leveled out. But yeah, it was. I was right there in the approach, so I don't know if they were horsing with me or if they never saw me. I have no idea.
It's kind of fun to talk to them too. We're there.
Yeah.
I've also noticed quite a different tone and vocab and when it's a IMC day versus a VFR day, and it can be IMC in Willamette Valley, right? Everybody's going in and out of Portland on an instrument plan, and here we are with enough broken overcast in Hood River to be flying VFR. But the folks going in on that Hood 4 may have no idea that they're supposed to be looking for traffic. They're expecting vectors and ATC and nobody. They're expecting not to have to look out the window.
That's absolutely correct. In fact, most of those guys don't come from this part of the country and don't even know there's a glider port.
Yeah. So the more we can communicate, the safer we are. We tell them we're there, and then the filter that Kelly mentioned, maybe ATC can click a button and look for traffic that's only moving at 10 or 20 knots ground speed. And if they can see it, then they can do something about it. If you don't tell them where you are, then you're like a ghost. And
Yeah, you'd be a bug splatter
can't
on that
help.
C-130. That would not be good.
right.
We could put together a little presentation or something to put on the site and just kind of mark off areas where you might start talking to ATC and who you talk to and especially Ian or anyone that's a little bit uncomfortable with the language to use or how to talk to them. We can practice it, meaning any of us can play the role of ATC.
Yeah.
And
they're valid worries, because I didn't learn until years into flying, and I learned all my flying in Hood River. I didn't really appreciate that 3,000 to 5,000 feet, it's pretty busy along the Columbia River east-west, and 9,000 to 12,000 feet, it's pretty busy along those power lines in Parkdale. So there's some key spots that we can highlight for some of us less experienced.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should publish the frequencies too, because I don't even know what frequency you'd contact the Portland Approach or Seattle Center on.
Well, that's a good point, Jeff. Mark mentioned 119er 65.
Yeah.
And I was seeing another one if you click on Hood River more info, let me get back to that.
That one,
Mark, what-
our for Seattle Center, for our coverage area.
1965. Yeah, that works.
Yeah, and if you go up, when you get close to Adams, then they're going to switch you over to another field. It's a separate, the next frequency, the next, I don't know, what do you call those sections, Jeff?
Sectors.
Sectors.
Yeah, but you're going to get somewhere around Hood River. They hand you off to Portland Approach too, which is probably whole nother frequency. I mean, that's
Yeah.
kind of a area.
It might also depend on altitude.
Which runway
if
they're.
you look up,
It
if you
depends
look
on
up
which
Ken
runway they're
Jurster,
using Portland too, because they're,
Yeah.
like you say, 9,000 to 12,000. They're 9,000 if they're landing to the west. And
Oh, you know what? Here.
So what's that approach called that's over the Parkdale Valley there? It's called
Hood
Just
4.
The Hood 4 arrival.
Hood 4 arrival.
The local FSDO used to produce, let me turn off my virtual background here, used to produce this. Sorry, let me.
I'm
Yeah.
looking at the low IFR chart, 119 or 65 at Hood River. You're looking for, and then Seattle Center at 132.6.
The local FISDO used to produce this. I don't know if they still do, and I don't know if this is still accurate, but this is a refrigerator magnet, and I have a few of these. And this is all the frequencies up here around Oregon, and we're right here. That's the Clickatat. That's the Clickatat VOR, and this has all the sectors and all the frequencies.
Mhm.
And I've never found this published anywhere except for these refrigerator magnets. But I tell you, it's gotten me through nearly 10 years of flying around here now.
Mhm.
Let's see if I can get that up on the website.
Yeah, we should make a copy of that magnet.
So, hey, I just YouTube got a video of Hood 4 arrival, and it's a 1-minute video of somebody flying that approach. It takes you right over Parkdale Valley at about 8,000 or 9,000 feet. It's like, wow.
Yeah, yeah.
It's amazing. It shows you exactly what they fly.
So that's a good point. And I'm seeing, if you look in the chart supplement for Hood River, Ken Jerdstead Airfield, the nearest ATC is listed as 135.5. And I think they're right, whether it's the frequency mark identified or 135.45 or
Yeah, Portland approach is 124.35 on that Hood 4 arrival.
See if any inbound traffic on Hood 4 is going to be an issue.
Well, I think if you can just remember that
Lost my connection.
1965, they'll put you on a different one if they don't like you there.
Yeah, exactly. My guess is that the guy running the approach from Hood 4 is also running that sector.
Yeah,
Would that
but
be right, Jeff?
like I said, that's right about the handoff point to where they're going to put you on the Portland approach. So, like I said, if you call them up on 1965, if they want you to talk to approach, they'll give you that frequency. Don't be afraid of the ATC. They're not scary. They're people. What's going on with audio? Cory's lips are moving, but it's.
I hear you good, Jeff. Can you hear me?
Okay, I was just reading Joe Wampler's text, group chat to everyone. Joe Wampler is saying 124.35 is PDX at Parkdale.
124.35.
Yeah. And he's been flying here a long time. He must know something.
Well, when you get a chance, you get on YouTube, just put in Hood 4 arrival. There's a great video there. I hope I might have saw the glider as he flew by. It was pretty amazing.
Now I see Cory's fingers moving.
You know, one day we'll our little marquee we have out there at the glider port. We're going to have put a bulletin board out there with you know, all this information on it, because you know, people start coming out to go flying that aren't familiar, or even if you know, just people want to go flying and can't remember that frequency and stuff. It'd be nice to have it all in one spot where a guy could just access it before he got into his glider, you know.
Did you guys read what was it, the Clee's email about the change in the wave window from the FAA?
Yeah, I read something about that.
Like
they're
they
trying
want
to
us all to submit our individual name and aircraft number and pilot license and everything to be able to have access. It's not like it's just a blanket waiver. They want to know, it's like you.
Like you'd register for it or something. Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, my impression was they just don't want us.
Well, that's, they're just making it harder, you know?
Yeah.
It's probably a given.
However, I mean, can you access it at the transponder? Can you just request, you know, to go in there, even though, I mean, if you have the right equipment, can you?
Well,
you
technically you have to be an IFR pilot, and
Okay.
and the plane has to be IFR rated.
yeah, it's supposed to be an instrument flight plan.
I mean, you know, once I get an ADS-B in my airplane, I could do that. Jeff could do that. Who else here is IFR rated? Is Joe? Or, yep, Steve.
Yeah.
Just tell them you want a mountain tour and you can do what you want.
Yeah. I've seen a few mountain tours go by. I've been in a jet or two that's flown real close to the mountain. I was
Yeah.
amazed looking out the window going, whoa, there's Mount Hood.
So along a whole nother line of work, I'm gonna go out and see if I can get that golf cart running here in the next day. It's not raining too bad. It pulled up that back seat and I couldn't believe how much filth was under there. I mean, you couldn't even hardly see where the carburetor was. The dirt was so thick. So I'm gonna spray it down and take the air cleaner out and see how bad that is. And I charged up the batteries, so hopefully we'll get that working.
Hey, why we got a few minutes here? Thanks, Jeff, for doing that. But why we got a few minutes here, Jeff, and everybody, if anyone here is wanting to be a future CFIG, Steve, what? Tell us about your
fill
week
us in.
of prep and what you got asked from Tony Joe Bush, the DPE.
Well, it was about I think we ended up a little under 5 hours on the oral exam. It was my initial CFI, so this is my first one. I intend to add on powered CFI next, and I really was planning on doing that first, but this kind of made more sense to me. So I did the glider CFI as my initial, and it was a good experience. I did a lot of studying on my own in advance. So fortunately, my regular job is pretty slow right now, so I was able to hit the books pretty hard at work. But it was a great experience. Took me, I did my commercial glider add-on the first week I was there, and then I did the CFIG add-on the second week, and that's a lot. It wasn't a lot of flying, but it was a lot of ground. So I spent a lot of time with Frank there, doing groundwork in preparation for it. And Tony's a great examiner, and I think they're not supposed to teach you on your check ride, but I did learn a lot from him on the check ride as well. So that was really a great experience.
What kind of things did he ask you?
Oh, well, let's see. As far as the oral exam.
Yeah, anything surprising or anything hard or?
No, I don't think there was anything hard. And I don't know that you could be 100% prepared for it, but if you know where to look for the information, it's an open book exam, so you've got the FARs there, you've got the glider flying handbook, you can reference the flight instructor's handbook as well. It's FAA document, that they reference. So you have access to that, and he'd give you time. He'll go get a cup of coffee while you search for the information. And, and it was a situation where we had a fictitious scenario. Basically, a retired airline pilot comes in and he wants to get his glider license, an add-on, and what steps are you going to go through, and interviewing him as if that was going to be your student and asking him questions. And it was really pretty interesting. It was an eye-opening thing, but it's really about being a people person, and asking the questions, and you're interacting with people and human behavior, with the fundamentals of instruction. that's, you're dealing with people, and they want you to be, you know, it's not just a situation where you're teaching people to fly. Really, you're dealing with people on a personal basis. So that was kind of a big part of it. And so
So
as far,
a
go
lot of
ahead.
the questions come out of the fundamentals of instruction.
Well, now, so since this was my initial CFI, there was quite a bit of a focus on that. But if you already are a CFI and you're adding on a glider, I think that they don't really focus on that. They assume you have that information.
It's been 20 years since I did instructing. I think everybody, Frank and Mike and everybody says they're going to probably focus on that, just like I was in the initial.
Well, yeah, and I got a lot. There's a lot of great resources on YouTube of some Fly 8 Mike Alpha is one that's a really good. This guy's got a lot of good information as far as prepping you for that. So I think that'd be a good use of your time. Something like
What was that?
It's I could email you the link. It's a flight instructor. He was based in Florida. He also does a lot of work in Alaska. And he's got a YouTube channel and a lot of information on getting your CFI, all the ratings really. But that was really valuable. I think it gave me a real good insight. I think I was over prepared, but I'd rather be over prepared than under prepared.
Anything like that you can do to help me out, I'll probably be the next in line. I don't know if I was going to go to Robin Reed probably
Yeah, that would be, I would suggest doing that one. The Fly 8 Mike Alpha has got a whole CFI course, and I think it does a monthly subscription. I think I paid $120 a month, but it only took me a month to really go through a lot of the CFI specific training. But it's Fly 8, the number 8 Mike, or MA, Fly 8 Mike Alpha. And he's got a great YouTube channel and a lot of great information for, doing it's all focused on powered, but, as far as instructor, that's all, it's all related.
What did Tony ask you to do as your lesson?
For the check ride? Okay. So I had
the part, right? Doesn't he make you teach one?
Right.
And then you fly one.
Yeah, that's correct. And we had that in advance, so we knew, and he kind of does the same thing. So, at Estrella, they knew what he was going to want for an assignment. My flight lesson was to teach forward slips to landing, and my my ground lesson was to teach to do a cross country, a glider cross country, and the different considerations for doing that. So I wrote up this great big lesson plan on, not great big, but I practiced it, giving it to myself on camera on a GoPro. So I recorded it, and then I go back and watch myself present it and kind of polish it a bit. And so that worked out really well. And then when it came down to it, he presented me with this scenario that I'm teaching an airline pilot that's retired, and he's got a ton of experience. And he said, now tailor your lesson plan that you're teaching this guy. Well, now, there's a lot of aspects of it that I probably wouldn't, whereas if you're teaching somebody who's just a brand new pilot, you need to cover all these little, the things, what is a line of longitude and latitude, and how do you chart a course and convert it to magnetic? And well, maybe you do need to teach an airline pilot that they're using the computers for all that stuff. But it was a situation where you ask questions, you feel it out, and you teach them to their level of experience. So, it was a great experience, really was. But it's a lot of preparation and then using judgment and as to what aspects of it you're going to focus on. And then the flight portion of the exam was kind of surprising, and I probably wasn't as prepared for that as I would have liked to have been. It worked out pretty well, but I'm sitting in the back seat. He's flying as a student, and then he wants me to coach him. Is he high on tow? How do I tell him that? Well, gee, the tow plane needs to be on the horizon. And if they don't respond to that, well, then you give them, hey, well, you need apply some back pressure, and if they don't respond to that, then okay, now I'm taking over, follow along on the controls. And so it's kind of a stepping up situation. He didn't like it if you got right on the controls and didn't, took that away. He said that's something that an initial instructor tends to do, is take the controls away from the student without allowing them to, to make some mistakes. And then, as I kind of got a feel for that, I corrected it, and The one thing that I really screwed up on, sitting in the back of that 232, I'm teaching him to do a steep turn, and I couldn't see the yaw string because his head's blocking the yaw string. They had one up above my head, but I didn't look up at it. And my inclination was that he is over banking in this turn. Well, really, he was uncoordinated. And I took the controls away and I corrected it and got the glider lined out again. But really, the thing I should have been looking at my yaw string to determine that he was in an uncoordinated flight condition. But yeah, I think every check ride that I've had has been a humbling experience. I kind of feel like, oh, I made it through this thing. The only one I felt like I was really prepared for was my private pilot check ride 30 years ago. And ever since then, I felt like, gee, I could have done a lot better. But, it's like anything, you learn. It's a license to learn, I think.
So how many flights did you do on the check ride?
Should have gotten away with 2. I did 3.
Okay.
Kind of blew the first one. He said, "What did you do wrong?" And really, he's really fair examiner. If you can identify the mistake you made in that previous ride, then he'll give you let's go ahead. And I said, hey, I picked the wrong aiming point. We were landing in Estrella all the time I was there. 2 weeks, we were landing to the east. The wind just favored landing to the east. Well, the wind changed that day. Now we're landing to the west, and all of the visual cues, the aiming points were kind of out of place.
Oh yeah.
And I told him, hey, I picked the wrong aiming point to get us to make our landing where I wanted it to be. He said, there you go. What do you want to do? I said, I want to go again. We pushed out, towed out, and the next time nailed it. So yeah, it was a really good experience.
It's a nerve-wracking experiment, I think, science experiment, right? Like you're like I've already done 2 CFI rides, my power in the CFIG, but this examiner who's like super knowledgeable, great pilot, maybe, is supposed to play this novice student on you.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
then they're supposed to go wrong and you're supposed to recognize it. And it's like, it's really hard. And
it is absolutely, it's kind of
I hate check rides.
Cory,
you're muted.
Unmute. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep. Steve, will you weigh in on this discussion we've had? It's been going on for a year or more on the right trainer. Right. We started our club with Big Orange. We got a bunch of
well, 233 is a fantastic training glider.
beginner pilots through their check rides and big giving. Fantastic. And then we stepped to the K21. We sold Big Orange, but we're wondering if that is a long-term, is that the right solution given the performance is nice in the K21, but when you sign off a student off to go solo, is that first solo best? Is it a good fit in the K21, or do you wish you had a 233 in the fleet?
I would defer to Mark on that. I think the K21 is phenomenal. I mean, that's what it costs to go to get your training at Estrella in a K21. It's like 2.5 times the price of flying a 233. So it's a phenomenal opportunity for anybody who's learning to fly to be able to fly that K21. I think it's great. I don't know. What do you think, Mark? I mean,
they think that their K21 is a hangar queen.
Mm-hmm.
They really do. And I mean, they're a pilot factory. I mean, they do a great job. I don't say that with any kind of insult, pilot factory, but they're not going to beat up their K21 for that, right? And I've always agreed that the 233 will teach a person how to fly, but it won't teach you how to soar, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And I mean, you can soar it, and And yeah, then you're definitely proving how awesome of a pilot you are. But to move from the 233 to the L33 is a leap. And when someone can prove to a CFI that you can fly the K-21, I'm going to feel real good about just putting you right into the L-33 and you're going to be able to fly it because all the performance is the same. It's the same LOD, it's the same air speeds. It's just got little shorter, nimbler wings.
Let me put it a different way. Let me phrase the question a different way, because I've been president of this club and vice president and tried to struggle with the club struggles. You lose sleep over some of these questions, and now Mark's kind of in the hot seat. The burning question that kept me up at night was kind of two parts. Do we have good instructors that are going to make sure our students are getting to the point where they're proficient and safe and progressing? We entrust our fleet and our reputation with these instructors, and can we get them to show up, right? Getting the instructors to show up. And there was a time when I don't know if it was true or not, but my mind chatter told me Mark Stanfield's our primary instructor right now, and I'm not going to get him to show up unless we go for this K-21. And I was I was dragging my heels on the K-21, and now I'm super glad we did it. But Steve, you're a newly minted CFIG. Does this factor into the equation on whether or not you're going to be showing up, whether or not we have a higher performance, nice glass ship, or would you be just as likely to show up in a 233 and instruct in a 233?
Well, in my mind, I'm looking forward to instructing in the K-21, and because I think that you can get, it's like Mark said, it's so much more capable, and so the training can be much more all-encompassing, right? So we can teach somebody to really go and soar with this glider. I think it's just so much more capable, and so yeah, it's an attraction.
Like the capability is undisputed. Like everybody agrees, the K-21 is more capable. But is it the right fit for our primary trainer? That's the gist of the question. But if you put yourself in the student's position. Right?
Well, let me ask Steve this, and maybe Mark afterwards. Would you feel good about soloing a student in a 233 over the K-21? I mean, it seems to me like the 233 is a little bit easier to fly, and I think you'd feel a little better about soloing a newbie student in the 233. How do you feel on that, Mark?
Last year I was nervous. Let me tell you, I mean, when we all worked real hard as a club to get that airplane. And I remember driving back with Frank thinking, oh man, what did I do? like I felt the heat of like, I hope this is really going to work out. And Frank was excited for the club too, but his biggest concern was those runway lights, right? And he's like, man, if you guys could just get rid of those, like this is just a dream situation. But I am definitely glad we have it. And this year I've soloed some people in it that have less experience and of course more, and I definitely feel it's the right thing to do. And then as soon as we're soloing them, I'm like, let's put them in the L-33, now I will say it was always part of my plan to try to get a 233 again. Now, and I've even contacted the guy who bought ours, and I was just thinking today that it's funny you brought this up today, Cory, that I was thinking I'm going to call him again, especially because Ron is hot to trot to do a youth camp. And so I was thinking about calling, what is that guy's name? Fairfax. He had a weird name. That's right. Fairfax. I was thinking about calling him and telling him, hey man, we're starting a youth camp. Will you donate that 233 back to was. So, and the last call I had with him, he was like, well, yeah, maybe we will sell this back to you. He's like, let me think about that. And he's like, I'll give you a call at the end of the week. I didn't hear from him, but the fact that like that door is open with him, I'm thinking maybe we'll get Big Orange back and maybe we'll get it back for free. So I'm trying to work that angle. Here's where I think the 233 is a great plane, and it's for I think for people that are a little slow to get it, right? A little slow to get the landing, or maybe or a little like nervous flyers, right? I think that's where it really fits in. Because kids, they get it. I mean, all these kids are flying this thing great. It's kind of more of your 50 plus sometimes that are new pilots that really benefited from a 233.
Well, so it's the learning curve, which you mentioned, and Steve mentioned the price. If they're charging 2.5 times as much to do the same level of training in a K-21 at Estrella, that's a data point, right?
Yeah, but then again, they aren't using it either. It's like Mark said, it's a hangar queen.
Exactly.
So I
Right,
think they price it to keep it.
I looked up Sugar Brush, Vermont. Well, actually, Ron found Sugar Brush, Vermont's youth camp, and so then the Soaring Club, and I looked on what they put on for their youth camp, and I looked at their price sheets. And whenever I come across a club, I look up their price sheets, and they have a 233, 2 Grobe 103s, and a K-21. And their K-21, club members, they only charge 35 an hour. We charge 50 an hour. Now, if you were a non-member, it was like 75 an hour or something. Or it was non-members or inactive members was 75. So, I mean, I think the way we have our K-21 priced per hour now for the kids, it's free, right? And but the youth fund did put a big chunk of money down for the K-21, but for the I think between the clubs of all the stuff I've seen and the commercial places, we're in the middle for what we charge for K-21.
So let's put the money thing aside. We all understand K-21 costs more, and there's different ways to slice that potato. Ian, are you still on? Let's hear from Ian as far as a recent guy who's been through the program and comfort level. Like, what is your comfort level being responsible for this hunk of metal 233 versus a K-21? Because I believe Ian did some 233 training at Estrella as well, right?
Yeah, I actually did most of my training before getting my license in the 233, and I really feel like if we did get that 233 back, that we should at least solo students in that, because at the Civil Air Patrol camp, like they had L-23s, and like there were huge dents in all of them. Like they were so banged up and stuff, and like sitting here, I had never thought before that like some students might on solo especially might accidentally run off the runway into a runway light. And I was thinking, yeah, it might be good to have a cheap little solo plane for students to use on their solo, but then again they could always use the 126 to solo as well. So there's that.
Well, would you feel comfortable if an instructor said, okay, you met your requirements in the K-21, you're looking good, but this airplane's too expensive, we don't trust our solo students in it, we're going to put you in a 126 for your first solo? How would that feel?
Man, I don't know. I mean, I grew up on the 233 and then into the 126, so I was excited to go into the 126. So yeah,
Okay.
I don't know.
Your first solo.
Personally, I would understand
when you're not used to, that you've never
Yeah.
flown before. That would be kind of scary, I would think.
So
Yeah,
Cory, or what you're saying then is you're thinking that maybe a 233 would be better for the primary trainer, and then the ASK for more advanced training. Because quite frankly, with the way that Hood River is weather-wise, with the wind that we have, you really can't go. We don't have thermals to speak of much, and so to really take advantage of this area, you need to be able to fly a little higher performance airplane than the 233. So maybe the 233 should be the primary trainer, and then after that you move up to the the ASK, which would also prepare you for the leaving the immediate area and perhaps venturing into the Parkdale Valley and so on and so forth.
yeah, and I didn't even think about the weather conditions either when soloing in the 126, because personally I know that that does not cut very well into the wind, especially with light guys like me. So that might not be like a great solo aircraft. So yeah, I
Well,
don't
there's
know.
solo and then there's cross country, and
Yeah.
you don't right, you don't have to go cross country on your first couple of solos. You can just make them pattern laps if you want. Right?
Yeah.
Stay right over the airport. No, it's just a question. Like it just keeps popping up for me. I don't know the right answer, but I thought we'd put Steve Frisbee in the hot seat now that he's a big shot at CFIG and
Right, big
he
shot.
can weigh
Wow,
in on
like,
this.
wealth of knowledge, right?
Yeah.
So, I think Kelly's right. I think that 233 as a primary trainer, in a perfect world, we got both of them, right? So,
Yeah, I think it's true. I mean, the from the German standpoint, the K-21 is supposed to come with a K-23, which is the solo seat. It's the same airplane, right? And they quit making K-23s. Rex has a couple. He'd gladly sell us one for probably like 35,000. But to me, I'm like, you could just stick them in the L-33, and you got a very similar program, right? But that was just their version, right? I mean, Europe's in love with fiberglass and plastics and things like that, and that was their answer and their version to the older Schweitzer 233 to 126, right? And
That makes sense.
and yeah, so
I did
It's-
find that the transition between the 233 and the L-33 was very big at all. I actually think that the L-33 was a lot easier to fly than the 233 in a lot of respects. It's a good glider, and it could easily be that move up glider if you learned in a 233. I think no problem. Of course, I think we've had students, do that, right? We've had a couple of kids make that transition, didn't we? Without the ASK, Nathan did, I think.
yeah, yeah. He'd had some 126 time before,
Mhm.
right? Right. And you were also a power guy, right? Before soaring.
Yeah, but I'm still making that judgment based on, being a new glider kind of guy. I had a lot of apprehension about climbing into that little glider after being in the 233. But, after the first flight, I was like, wow, this is, it wasn't overly sensitive or anything. So I thought it was a pretty good transition.
that was
No,
my
it-
impression flying the L-33 as well. I mean, I thought it was I think it was a fairly easy transition, but I had some grow up time, but yeah, I don't think it's that big of a jump.
Yeah, even if somebody learned to fly the 233, you could take them up in the ASK for a flight or two that would definitely prep them for the L33, you know. But I don't know if I'm worried about, using the L33 as a, a glider where people are using it to solo in. I don't think that we want a lot of students. I think we want to move them over to the L33 as quickly as possible, just to keep that thing from running into a landing light or something else. I mean, it would be kind of nice to keep that as possibly a trainer, but as soon as that person solos in it, let's move them over to the L33 and not have it as a primary solo aircraft for new students.
Yeah, that's the idea, right? I mean, their whole idea at the moment, that's what we have to do, right? Like I mean, when you're an instructor and you've ticked all those boxes of what they have to have knowledge-wise and practical-wise to solo, right? I mean, you're gonna really make sure you're comfortable with their ability and that they've seen a few possible excursions that they've rescued, right? Like I know, and Steve will be learning these things for himself. Like, when are you ready to let a guy solo, right? And for me, I've got to see a few just really bad mess ups and see that they've totally recovered it and confident, and we've talked through those and then I know, like, okay, they're good, right? And then at that point, okay, it's not like a wild wind day, right? Like, it's like, okay, this is a day would have no problem handling. We've done a few landings and they're rock solid, and then it's just kind of like, okay, I'm gonna get out, and then they go, and it's uneventful, right? I mean, I remember. I don't know, Ian, talk about your first solo day.
It was really bumpy. That it was probably one of the first really crazy bumpy days I've ever flown in, and I ended up actually hitting my head on the canopy of the 233 Big Orange, and that kind of scared me at first, but it really woke me up. And I mean, everything after the first two patterns were real good and smooth, and then you bet me that $50 that I wouldn't land on that one little area on the stripe, and I did, and it was fun.
Yeah, he took $50 from me on that day, right? So, like, I knew he was gonna. I knew the level that I trained him, and that he was performing to that level. And I said, hey, look, if you can put the end of the 233 thing right here at the end of this, you got 3 chances right here. Here's your solos, and if you can put one of them right there, $50. And he did.
He just wishes he had specified that I couldn't use the brake. He meant 0 energy. Like, I ended up stopping right there without the brake, but I cheated and used the
You're
brake.
allowed to use the brake. That's part of the tool. But that's just. I mean, I remember the first time I soloed Bill. That was the first glider student I soloed. They took off, and my stomach turned up upside down, and I think Stan was standing there, and I said, "My God, what have I done?" And it all worked out fine.
All right, you guys, I gotta go.
Yeah.
That was fun.
Yep.
Fun.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Cory. Great job. Great
Thank you.
presentation.
Thanks for hosting. Thanks for putting it together.
All right, guys. We'll see
guys
you out
later.
on the field.
Have a good one.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you. Thanks, Ian. Thanks, Cory.